New York prosecutors, meanwhile, quitting district attorneys' offices in droves. The mass exodus coming after DAs enacted controversial criminal justice reforms. The New York Post reports Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg's office lost 65 assistant district attorneys, about 12% of his overall staff. DAs in Brooklyn and the Bronx facing the same fate. Critics say it's because prosecutors are not allowed to do their jobs.
They're fleeing because the prosecutors that work for him are being told, don't prosecute. Let the criminals get away with everything. Put them back on the streets. Don't go for, the recommendation for the most penalties and time. And so they're frustrated. They're leaving. But I think what happened in San Francisco is a shot across the bow for everybody. You're going to be a George Soros type of prosecutor. There's no room for you here.
New York City seeing nearly 40% surge in overall crime just over the last year alone. Robberies, break-ins, felony assault are all way up. And today's New York Post boils it all down. Bust of the century. Serial shoplifter walks after 100th arrest. Jasonrantz, Seattle radio show host. He's been talking about this a long time. You and I have talked about this a long time. Jason, shouldn't this mass exodus that we are now seeing, especially in Bragg's office, shouldn't this be a wake-up call?
It should, but I fear it's going to be viewed as good news to folks like Alvin Bragg or any DA who would like to clean ship and purge all of the folks in their offices that don't share the same ideological position that they do. I mean, from that perspective, it's good news because he doesn't have to worry now, Prosecutor Bragg doesn't have to worry anymore as to whether or not there's going to be any compliance with his policies. He can imagine now less leaks coming from his office because people who don't believe in the cause are no longer there. So on that hand, he's probably looking this as good news. From a public perspective, we should all look at this and be terrified, because not only does this mean that Bragg now has even more control over his office, but on top of that, there's going to be less people to show any resistance whatsoever and shine a spotlight on some of these cases that need a spotlight to be put on it.
Just a devastating weekend to report in Chicago over the weekend as a Washington Examiner op-ed argues that skyrocketing crime in these major cities is a huge driver behind a mass exodus from Democrats' America. People are fleeing cities such as New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Chicago amid this violence, Jason. And just this weekend alone in Chicago, a 5-month-old baby girl was killed while sitting in a car. Her father was driving her home. It was 6:45 at night when gunfire erupted, and the gunman is still on the loose. Just absolutely heartbreaking, but Jason, all too common.
It is, and at some point we have to sit back and say, look, we know what the prosecutors are doing. We know what mayors and city councils are doing in these cities. So what are you doing as a constituent, as a member of the community who I'm imagining is sick and tired of getting these stories, whether it's in Chicago, New York, Seattle, or elsewhere? What are you doing to push back? Because all too often people just sort of sit back and they don't really know what to do. But it's actually rather easy to get more organized. You're sick and tired of all the bloodshed. Well, how about this? Even if you're making one phone call or sending one email to your representative to put pressure on them, to tell them, hey, look, your political futures are on the line if you don't get this in order. And for the most part, a lot of folks on the left already kind of know that in positions of power where these midterms are coming. We still believe that there's going to be a red wave, but there's going to be a lot of blood spilled in between now and November. And so people really do need to rise up and take control of their neighborhoods. And that, by the way, sometimes just means community watches. Anything to activate a neighborhood to make it so that these bad guys, these criminals, these degenerates don't feel so emboldened and enabled to commit these kinds of acts.
Jason, the governors of California, Washington, and Oregon, meanwhile, have issued what they're calling a multi-state commitment to reproductive freedom. They are now promising to help women in the wake of Roe v. Wade being overturned. They're now going to help women traveling to the West Coast to get abortions after that decision. Listen.
We will continue to protect patients from any state who come to our states for abortion care.
Defend doctors, nurses, and medical professionals working to support patients seeking reproductive care in our states.
We're going to protect patient privacy.
We will resist intrusions by out-of-state prosecutors, law enforcement, or vigilantes trying to investigate patients receiving services in our states.
Okay, so that coming from the office of Governor Gavin Newsom and abroad, this deal comes as 84 district attorneys in 29 states now vowed not to press charges against patients or providers over abortion. Some of those 29 states have very strict laws restricting or banning abortion. You know, a lot of private companies have gone this way. They are going to help their employees go where necessary, and some cases reimbursing for travel costs to get an abortion if they work in a state where one is not allowed. And now some governors promoting abortion tourism. Jason.
Yeah, this is the birth of abortion tourism, where we'll fly you out to California, Oregon, or Washington. We'll put you up in a nice hotel room. We'll give you a gift card to a restaurant when you're done. It's very disgusting, and it really does highlight some of the vile positions that some folks on the left have when it comes to abortion. It's rather disturbing. There is a huge difference between someone who is pro-choice and pro-abortion. And when you are focusing exclusively on aborting a pregnancy, and that's really all you care about, that's all you're fighting about, you're never going out there and saying, hey, maybe we should also put some extra funding into pregnancy centers so women who are choosing to give birth will have some support. None of that exists. They are pro-abortion. And I think that does a huge disservice, not only to life, obviously, but to the Democrats who want to hold a little bit more reasonable position when it comes to abortion rights.
Okay. We will certainly have more on that coming up. A lot of reaction continues to pour in across the country. Jasonrantz, thank you very much for joining us. Great to see you.